Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Wendy Sachs. I'm a member of the board of Plant Powered Metro New York and happy to welcome you back to our monthly series, Cooking with Chef Carole. This is presented by Plant Powered Metro New York and co-sponsored by the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan, Marlene Meyerson JCC, something like that. Anyway, Plant Powered Metro New York empowers people to achieve better health and overcome chronic disease through a whole food, plant-based approach to nutrition. We offer evidence-based education, resources, and a grassroots network of support to create community and inspire change. Together as leaders, organizers, and educators, we raise awareness about the dramatic health benefits of a whole food plant-based nutritional plan and empower individuals to make their own lifestyle choices and adjustments and lead projects that spark changes in food policy, food practice, and food culture. A couple of general announcements. A really warm welcome to the New York Health and Hospitals Association Jumpstart participants and members of the JCC, and of course to our community and our loyal fans. So we've had a bit of a hiatus, so it's really nice to welcome you back. And to all those who are tuning in today, including those who are listening to the replay. So as always, it's good to have you here. It's October, so dark leafy greens and Swiss chard and kale and collards are all abundant in the farmers markets right now with apples and squashes. And as usual, we encourage everyone here to buy organic if you can, and regenerative farmed vegetables if you can get those, because the quality of soil makes a difference in the vegetables, and quality of soil, of course, helps us mitigate climate change. So we encourage you to do that. Guidelines, please let us know where you're from in the chat. Also, please ask questions in the chat. Carole and I usually allow time during the demo, but if not, we'll save a few minutes at the end and answer as many questions as we can. And if you're enjoying the presentation, please like us on Facebook and on YouTube, or even LinkedIn if you're watching from there, because all the likes definitely help us. Okay, we'll get started, I promise, in just a minute. A couple of very quick, short announcements. Today, we are currently accepting registrants for our upcoming public Jumpstart, which begins October 18th, and today is the last day to register. And if you're considering going plant-based, or if you're already experienced and want a refresher, I highly recommend joining us for our 21-day educational program. October 17th is our Heart to Healthy Heart series with Dr. Heather Shankman, who's an interventional cardiologist, and she's the author of the Vegan Heart Doctor's Guide to Reversing Heart Disease, Losing Weight, and Reclaiming Your Life. October 20th, we have an in-person social gathering at District Sigue in Queens. Please sign up no later than tomorrow. October 21st, again, a potluck gathering at Ethos Farm in Long Valley. Ethos is a regenerative farm for anybody in the New York, New Jersey, tri-state area. Please join us on Saturday. And then very quickly, October 21st, 24th, we're having an in-person event sponsored again by the Marlene Meyerson JCC with Dr. Jessica Krant on eating for skin health and anti-aging. So those of you from the JCC, we'd love to have you there in person. And October 25th, we're having another fall social at Caravan of Dreams on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I will have other announcements. We've got a plantathon coming up and some other exciting things happening in November. I'll save those for the end. Oh, wait, I should really do this now. Plantathon is coming this week. We'll be announcing an incredible lineup of 10 events in late November, 2 in person and 8 in our virtual showcase. This is all to celebrate the whole plant-based movement. And during our plantathon, it's really the time of year where we raise money for the variety of programs that we do, particularly programs in the other boroughs of Manhattan. So if you're not already on our mailing list, please sign up on the homepage of our webpage, so you'll get the scoop on Plantathon as soon as it's announced. It's a really big deal, and for all of you who can, we'd love to have you participate. Okay, Carole, here we go.
Oh my God, Wendy, so many announcements, I can't believe it.
There were a lot today because we've kind of been down for the entire month of September. So
I know, and
now
it's so
October and
nice to have
November.
everyone back, our own team, and welcoming the hospital people and the JCC, who are my people when I used to live in New York. I love the JCC so much. And welcome to everyone that's new, maybe first time cooking, maybe you've been cooking all your life like me. And I just welcome all of you. And we have kind of an interesting show today. I had some surgery a couple weeks ago in my mouth, and I was limited to I can't eat any nuts for at least 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. So that nuts are out of my diet, and I had to eat mushy food for a good week and a half, 2 weeks, and I'm now still on kind of soft foods. So I started thinking I need to eat only comfort food. Like that was my thing. Was I had the surgery and I was just all the time eating comfort food, what was going to make me feel good. So what I put together for you today is some of my own comfort food. Now, I did interview a lot of people asking what their comfort food was. Mine is definitely cream of tomato soup. We're not making cream of tomato soup. We are making another kind of soup today that is from Deborah Madison's kitchen, who I really did learn from making soup. I swear I read so many and made so many Deborah Madison soup recipes that I felt like I went to my own private school with her, even though I never met her before, but I learned how to make soup from her. We're making yellow pea and coconut milk soup, which is delicious and is truly probably my second favorite soup after just a cream of tomato soup. And then we're also making mac and cheese. That is definitely not my comfort food, but every person I asked what their comfort food was, everybody told me mac and cheese. And I realized that that there's a really good recipe that I love making mac and cheese from butternut squash, which is part of a recipe that comes from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which I'm a Food for Life instructor, and I've taught this mac and cheese before, but it's really delicious, actually. And we're not going to use any cheese, and we're going to use butternut squash as our main sauce. So we're going to make that. And then I thought it would be just nice to make one baked good, okay? Because when I was transitioning from vegetarian to plant-based, the first thing I thought about was not how am I going to eat so many vegetables and grains and beans. I was doing that when I was a vegetarian. But what am I going to do without dessert, without butter, without sugar? And so I chose a recipe from Kathy Fisher's Straight Up Food. Maybe many of you know it. It's a zucchini bread, which I love. And why are we making zucchini bread? Because I've just harvested all my garden. I have an entire table full of just green tomatoes that are going to have to get ripe inside my house. And I think I have one zucchini left. I've been eating so much zucchini the last few weeks that I have to just be done with it. And if I don't see a zucchini for another few months, I'm just fine with that. So today is zucchini bread, but that will be at the very end. And I just think it's really important. All of us like sweets, all of us like desserts and things, and it's important to know that you can actually make a whole food plant-based and SOS, no sugar, no oil, no salt. Dessert tastes delicious. So we're going to get started, and I want to get started on the soup, and we're gonna then bounce back to go to the mac and cheese, and we're gonna come back to the soup because, as you know, soup takes time to cook, and we only have a little over an hour with all of you, so we have to do a little bit of starting. So this yellow pea soup usually comes from. We usually use yellow peas that look like this. I just wanted to take them out and just show you. These are yellow split peas. A lot of people don't eat beans, and they start to eat a lot of beans, and then it's hard on the digestion. So one good thing to do is, if you're not a bean person like me, then you would start with the lentils because they're easiest to digest. They're small and they're good easier for your digestion. Today, and I write this in the recipe, you can use red lentils, okay? And I'm just going to show you what red lentils, they're much, much smaller. They're red, might be more orange than red, kind of like the shade of my apron. And we're going to use those today because they break down quicker, and they're going to give you a little bit different color soup than the yellow split pea, but they're pretty much interchangeable for this recipe. And I chose the red lentils because I want to cook it fast. And I've already started cooking the lentils. So what I did was I measured 2 cups of lentils. I rinsed them in a colander like this, let the water pass through and just rinse them very well. And then I put them in a pot and I put 2 quarts of water over the lentils, and I put a low heat, and I've been cooking them for like an hour on the back stove behind me. So I just want you to know that I've kind of got a little bit of a jump start. That's a little funny laughter, actually. Jump start, we're with jump starters, and I got a jump start. But I'm making my own self laugh, Wendy. But the lentils are already cooking. So in this soup, when Deborah Madison makes this soup and she explains how to make it, she actually does this exact thing, that she cooks the lentils first, and then in another pan, she makes the onions and the spices, and then she puts the 2 together. So I didn't write up the recipe like that because I don't really like dirtying a pan when I don't have to. So in the recipe, I just want to make a note. I say take a big saute pan and you're going to saute the onions and the spices. And then once those are sauteed, then you're going to put the lentils and the water. You're going to let that cook. But we're actually going to do exactly how she wrote up the recipe. And again, I have a separate pan here. It's been getting hot. I'm not going to use any oil. We can use a little bit of water, and I'm going to just get a cup here, a glass full of water, and we're going to do what we call water saute. Now you can use broth or you can use water. This soup actually has no broth in it, so I haven't taken any broth out. So we're going to put these onions in. This soup also has no garlic, which I think is interesting, because almost always when you're sauteing the onions, you're also sauteing the garlic with it. But this soup doesn't have that. Let me just get a spoon, a good spoon for this. And you can hear that those are sizzling, and the reason it's sizzling is the pan was already getting warm. And I've kind of lowered it right now. Now, usually you would add a little bit of water as a water. That's so that they don't stick. But I have a nice ceramic pan, and the onions have their own sugars, their own juice that will release. But if I thought that the onions were sticking for any reason, then I would add a little bit of water. But at this moment, I don't need to do that. And I'm just going to make sure they're moving around. And they are. They're not getting stuck. They're already starting to cook and get brown already. And there's nothing like the smell of onions. I really do love them. And those are cooking, and like I said, there's no garlic involved at all. So the next thing that we want to do is we're going to mix our spices with the onions, okay? And what spices are we going to use? Well, we're going to use 2 bay leaves, okay? We're going to use, I'll just read them, 2 bay leaves. We're going to use 3 whole cloves of cloves, spice. You know, there's allspice and cloves. You can buy cloves ground, but they're little teeny, they're somewhere on this plate. And you can't even see them if I were to show them to you. It's like a little teeny little branch. And that's a clove. And I have 3 of those. So the bay leaves and the cloves will eventually come out of the soup, because you don't want to serve the soup, because the cloves, someone could bite it and it's just hard. Nothing will happen but if you were to bite it. But you're not really going to eat or chew it. Then there's going to be 1 large onion, which you already have. We have turmeric, we have cardamom, and we have cinnamon, and we have red pepper flakes. Now, the original recipe had some salt, but we're going to bring up the flavor with some citrus, and we're going to bring up the flavor with some celery. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little teeny bit of water in here. It's not sticking. I know it's not sticking, but it is definitely cooking. Smells so good. There's nothing like the smell of onions. If you're someone that likes to caramelize onions, and you've always used oil to caramelize onions, you definitely don't need it. They will really caramelize based on their own natural sugars. The next thing that we're going to do, and I had a thought about that for a minute, is we have some fresh celery. And the way when we're not using salt, we talk about this all the time in these demos, but I feel like I need to repeat it all the time, is we bring up flavor when you're not using salt 3 different ways. And we're doing all that in this soup today. We're going to use limes. So citrus is a way of bringing up flavor. We're going to use fresh herbs. Today we're using cilantro. And then we're also using dried spices. So we're doing all the things that you would do when you're not using salt and you're trying to get your flavors. Now, what is great about this recipe that I love so much is that it calls for 3 tablespoons of cilantro at the end of the soup. But at the beginning, we actually need a 1/4 cup of cilantro stems. So what I'm going to do is chop the stems, and that's going to go into the soup. Now, I bet that's new for many of you. Many of you probably just cut the stems and throw things away. But I'm going to cut pretty much, it's probably a little more than a 1/4 cup, but I think it's perfect. And it's just going to go right into there. And I love that. When I learned that from Deborah Madison, that you could use the stems, I'm just like, okay, all the time I'm going to use the stems. So that's what I do. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put these spices in, all the ones that I just mentioned. And then we're going to just get a little spatula, and we're going to just mix those around so that the spices start to blend with the onions and cook just for a very few minutes. Now, there is no real broth in here, and I'm just going to put a little bit of added water so that nothing is getting left behind. We want every one of those spices, and just this alone smells so delicious. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to just move this just a hair, and I'm going to make a switch. And let me just, how am I going to make a switch? I'm going to bring and show you. Oops, this is wet. 1 second here. We're going to put this hot pan on a pad here, and I'm going to get the soup. And it, like I said, has been cooking for a little bit, and we're going to let it finish cooking in the back. I just wanted to bring it close by to just show you. So I have to get the right spoons. So these are the lentils that have been cooking, and they're already pretty soft. The water looks cloudy, but that's just because of the starches that are coming off the lentils. And what we're going to do now is take this onion and spice mixture, which smells so heavenly. I think I could just eat that, honestly. There's nothing, and I'm going to make sure that all those spices, everything's getting into the soup. And now we're going to let it all cook together. And what I'm going to do is get a little bit, just get a spoon, because there's some spices left in this pan, just at the bottom. And if I add a little bit of broth here, I can swish it around and get it all out of here. And now we're in good shape. And now the soup is already looking like soup. It's incredible. Just adding those things makes the soup look like soup. And I'm just going to show it to you so you see. I just want you to see what it looks like. It looks very beautiful. Can't tilt it too much. I'm going to bring it to the back here because we need all the burners. And I'm just going to let that soup cook on a slow heat. And then eventually what we're going to do is we're going to add some spinach. There's no broth in this soup. It's all water. And then we're going to add some coconut milk. That's the base of the soup. And we'll talk a little bit about the coconut milk when I add it. We're going to add big, huge handfuls of spinach. We're going to add the rest of the cilantro, which I think I'll cut right this minute so it's ready for us. And we'll finish the soup, and we're going to make a special yogurt based little dollop so we can have garnish. So the soup gets garnished with rice and a spicy yogurt mixture. So it's pretty special because it has a lot of layering and texture, and it's really one of my favorite soups. Wendy, is there any questions thus far? Because we kind of have to stop with the soup for now, and we'll move on to the next thing.
Carole, I think we're ready to move on. It looks delicious, and I'm just sorry we're all not right there to taste it later already.
Well, it is really one of my favorite soups, and maybe just while I'm talking to you, Wendy, I feel like I just want to, maybe we'll talk for 1 minute about the coconut milk, okay?
Yep.
Just so that I don't forget when I'm transitioning, and it is kind of on my mind. So the recipe, Deborah's original recipe, calls for 15 ounces of coconut milk. And honestly, I've looked at a million cans of coconut milk, and there is no 15-ounce cans. There's only 13 and a half ounces. I never see 15-ounce can. So please don't worry about that when you're looking at the recipe and trying. She's telling you you need 1 large can of coconut milk. Now, coconut milk is full of fat. And if you're at all trying to watch your you're having weight management, you are also trying to watch your cholesterol, maybe what you're going to want to do is consider buying something that is called light coconut milk that doesn't have that much fat in it, okay? Now, what I usually do for this recipe is they call for 1 large can. I usually try to cut it totally in half if I can. And so if she asked for 15, I try to kind of cut it to 7. I often will use one of these little small cans, and that's all I'll use. This is unsweetened premium organic coconut milk, and I really try to just use half the amount that's recommended. But to get the real full flavor that she intended, because it's really a coconut-based soup, you would use the full can. Now, when I've used the full can, and maybe we will just open this can today, sometimes I've used just half of it, meaning that it's a little more than the can, which is only 5 ounces, but it's almost like using like 7 ounces, and that seems perfect. Now, what do you do with the rest of the coconut milk that you're not going to use? I usually actually put it in a container and freeze it, but you could put it in a smoothie, you could make a Thai dish. I mean, there's so many things that you could do with the leftover coconut milk, but for me, I just put it right into the freezer, into like a Ziploc bag. I label and date it, and then when I need the rest of the coconut milk, I get it out. So I think we'll open this big one today because I'm not normally having the big ones, and we'll use half of that in the soup. And
Carole?
Yes.
I do have a question. So a woman asks, if we do use salt, should we use less or no fresh herbs, dried spices, and or citrus?
Oh, I think you would use all the spices, all the citrus, because everything that's in the recipe you would use for sure. The salt, I can't remember. I think she has a teaspoon of salt. And what I tell people is if I went cold turkey, and because I was a salt lover, I never had high blood pressure. But when I tried to cut back on my salt, I couldn't transition, I had to just cut it out entirely. So we are allowed technically 1 teaspoon of salt a day, and and I do remind people that if you're not bringing home salted products, in other words, if you're using broth that has no sodium in it, you're using a canned tomatoes with no sodium, you're using beans with no sodium, then put the teaspoon of salt that we're allowed every day. Technically 1 teaspoon is the recommend, that's the amount, and put that on the table, and then just sprinkle some salt on your serving when you're serving your soup. But I do try to finish off the soup with, maybe I use a little bit more chili flakes, and maybe I use and the yogurt, we're going to make a spiced yogurt. So I find that it's easiest to just follow the recipe, and then if you need to put a little bit of salt, do it during the serving. I hope that answers the question, Wendy.
It does. And I did write in the chat for Charlotte that, adding herbs and adding the citrus won't necessarily make it more salty. So if you have your salt in there, it's just really to your flavor. And some spices are salted, but many are not. So it's really, all of those are just garnishes for your own taste.
Yeah, and I think it's important to learn how to cook without the salt and learn how to bring up the flavor in the most natural way possible. There are definitely times when you maybe feel like the only way to do it is salt, but really you can do it. And like I said, today I'll probably use a little bit more of the pepper flakes, maybe a little bit more lime than it needs. And I just taste it based on how it tastes that very moment, because as things sit tomorrow, I'm a single person, so I eat this soup for the next 3 or 4 days, and it does get stronger as it sits, right? So I recommend just making it taste good when you're, when you make the big batch, and then if you need to tweak it, when you warm it up, you just add a few pepper flakes or something. Okay, so this is all going to go away here, and we are going to start our mac and cheese process. And I guess, one thing maybe before we finish, maybe we'll make, in case we run out of time and I get so busy, we'll finish making, I made a little bit of, so the soup calls for rice. And you can use any kind of rice that you want. Normally I use a scoop of brown rice because you're just getting a dollop of rice on the top of the soup, along with a little bit of spicy yogurt. I usually use the brown rice. Today I actually cooked very long extra grain white rice, basmati rice, because it is so lovely, and I really love this long grain white rice. Now, white rice kind of has a bad rap in the sense that it's high on the glycemic index, and you are way better off eating brown, red, or black rice. Okay, it's just a healthier choice for you to eat those other rices. But because I'm just using the rice as a garnish, and this rice is fragrant and very long grain, that I use it as an excuse to eat my little portion of white rice that I normally don't eat. So I cooked a little pot of brown rice, which is going to go on a dollop on the top when we finish the soup. But besides the rice, we actually need a little bit of spicy yogurt. And I'm going to make that in a bowl here and get a little spatula. Let me get a little, I'm going to get a little whisk here. So in the recipe, I tell you that what we need is half a cup of plant-based yogurt. You can choose whatever plant-based yogurt you would like. Often for this soup, I'll use a coconut yogurt because it's a coconut soup, and adding another layer of coconut makes it so heavenly. But I actually have Forager's cashew milk yogurt. It's unsweetened and plain. You can get almond milk, but just make sure you can get oat yogurt, and they're all a little bit different, and I encourage you to taste the ones, and always I encourage you to read the label and see what's in it. But you're looking for unsweetened plant-based yogurt, and what you want to do is you need 4 ounces, and I'm just going to use this whole thing because this is 5 ounces, 5.3, and I don't want to have just a little bit left. So I'm going to use this whole little, it's kind of like a breakfast cup of yogurt, small amount. It's a little more than a half a cup. And then what we're going to add to this is we're going to add cumin seeds, freshly ground pepper, we're going to add paprika, and we're going to add turmeric. So all of that, all those spices, a half a teaspoon of turmeric, half a teaspoon of paprika, half a teaspoon of cumin seed, and a half a teaspoon of pepper. And we could toast these if we wanted to. We could just toast them to get a little extra flavor. I'm actually not going to do that. And the other thing that I want to show you that I'm going to suddenly decide to do, I wasn't going to do this, but there is some whole cumin seeds there, and certainly we can eat, but we can definitely eat whole cumin seeds. But I want to just get this all kind of blended. Okay, and I'm just using a mortar and pestle, and I'm just kind of getting, I have a fresh ground black pepper, and my peppercorns were, kind of big. So that was what made me grab the mortar and pestle. But if you're just using ground pepper that doesn't look so big, like I just had, then you don't need to grind anything. But now that's all ground and all together. And that's going to go right in the yogurt, right? Just in the yogurt. And we'll get rid of this. We'll move that. And we'll just get this all mixed up. And that's going to be a delicious topping for the soup. And again, the longer this sits, the more delicious it gets. And you could add a little bit of lemon juice if you want, or lime juice. But it is so beautiful. And that's really going to make it special. And I'm just going to give it a little taste. And it's delicious. Yum, yum, yum. I can't wait for that to go on the soup. We're going to put that aside while we move along. And I think what's happening, I can hear the soup. And let me just not lose my place here and get the stirring mechanism here. And the soup is already cooking. It looks so great. It's starting to come to a boil. I'm going to put a little bit of higher heat. And while I'm back here, I'm going to do 2 things for the what do you call it? The mac and cheese. We're going to do 2 things. We're going to turn our oven on to broil, and then we're going to also start the pasta water because that needs to boil. So I'm going to put the oven on broil. And when you're wanting something to come to a boil, you want to use the lid, okay? That makes it just faster and easier. And I often forget to do that, and I'm waiting around. But just remember, most pots come with lids. And the idea is that you just put the lid on and the water will boil faster. So we're going to boil the pasta for the mac and cheese, and then we're going to make the sauce. And we have a lot of little things here to talk about. So first and foremost, let's talk about the pasta. Well, you could use shells if you want. I'm using the classic elbow, which is pretty much classic for mac and cheese. And I do want to tell you that a lot of people told me they eat mac and cheese for Thanksgiving. So I think this is kind of a good recipe to think about. Maybe you want to bring a whole big casserole pan to your Thanksgiving dinner and surprise people and tell them that you know how to make it with butternut squash sauce, which I think is such a nice, warm, and cozy idea and delicious, rather than the normal, what you might call mac and cheese. This is actually pretty healthy mac and cheese. The brand of pasta that I like to use is called Tinky Yada, and it is brown rice pasta, organic, elbow, okay? And I'm going to make half of a recipe of this because I'm just one person, and I just made this just a week and a half ago, and I just had mac and cheese, so I can only eat so much. And one thing that made me laugh today, when I got the new bag out of I just bought this bag, but I had a little bag, and I realized that the company sometimes puts the same pasta in different color bags. This is a green bag and this is a purple bag, but they're both brown rice pasta, and this one's already measured out. The full recipe calls for a pound, which would be basically one whole bag of this pasta. And I love this pasta because it says good texture, not mushy. And it is really true. You know, most of the time when they advertise, they're kind of like stretching the truth, but this is actually true. And it's not mushy, and you cook it till it's al dente. So what I'm going to do for now is we're going to literally put that in the boiling water. I can hear that it's almost boiling, not quite, but almost. Let me just, I'm going to bring it forward a little bit, put the bigger light on. And as soon as that boils, we're going to put it on, put the pasta in. And the soup looks so delicious. I'm so excited about the soup. Okay, so we talked about the pasta. The next thing we're going to go over is we're going to go over the squash. So this is our squash, and we need butternut squash. Now, could you make it with kombucha or acorn squash? I'm sure you can, but this kind of squash is the one that's most commonly found. And if some of you are not familiar with it, I cooked it in advance, but I'm going to kind of put it all back together for you to show you. This is the squash that is beige and usually is shapely, like almost like a pear. It's like small at the top and then it gets fat at the bottom. So you're going to look for a squash that is not gigantic. If you can, kind of on the smaller side. But if you have extra, you'll use it for something else. Like I will use this, and you could make butternut squash hummus, or there are so many other things that you can do with leftover squash. I also feed squash to my doggie, so she'll get a little bit of this extra squash that I have. But what you want to do is you want to cut the squash into big pieces. It doesn't matter if you cut it vertically or horizontally, but ultimately you do need to cut it in half when you're at the bottom to get all the seeds out. Okay, that's ultimately you want to get the seeds out. And then you're going to get a big pot, and you're going to steam the butternut squash. And you're going to use, if you have a basket, you can use a basket. Sometimes I don't. There have been times in my life I haven't had a basket, and I'll just put it on. What did I used to do when I didn't have a basket? I would just put a plate, an upside down plate, and I would put the squash on top or whatever I was trying to steam. But this is a steamer, and it's a really good thing to have. They're not very expensive. And you put water so it's underneath, so everything is steaming. And you literally just put the chunks that you've cut all around, and then you put the lid on the pot, and the water starts to boil and steam, and it cooks really fast, maybe 10, 12 minutes. How do you know when it's done? You put a fork into it just like a potato, and you know it's done. And then what's really great is when it's done and you let it cool just a little bit, you actually have to peel the skin. And you don't really need a peeler. You can do it with your knife. I left a little bit of it here to just show you how you would do that. You would just literally take your knife and just go around and just peel off the skin. Okay? And then you're going to cut the pumpkin, cut the squash, right? So once you take all that peel off, this goes into the compost. Can't do anything with that but the compost. And then you're going to cut up the butternut squash. Now, the squash that you use to make the sauce can be just cut up in any kind of chunks you want. I just made big chunks. But we also, beside making the sauce with the butternut squash, we also add butternut squash to mix in with the pasta. So that I actually small dice and I make it look kind of nice. But if you want to leave it all chunky and big, that's fine too. It's just that I prefer to have little bites of butternut squash rather than big bites of butternut squash. So I did that all in advance. The water's boiling, so I just want to put the pasta in. And it says that, I never read the package, but it's maybe good to do that. But it just says that it takes about stir, occasion, and cook for 14 to 15 minutes. I'm not sure I ever cook it for 14 to 15 minutes. I cook it so it's al dente, because what's going to happen is when we mix that pasta in with the sauce and then we put it in the oven for a very few minutes, the pasta is going to expand, and it's even going to expand if you have leftover tomorrow. And so it's just better to make it al dente. You want to definitely get it cooked, but you don't want to overcook it. You don't want it to be soft and mushy. You want it to be al dente, which means that it has a little bite to it when you mix it. The soup is cooking, and I'm going to just lower it a little bit. It's cooking like crazy, and it's looking amazing.
Carole,
Yes.
while you're cooking, there was a question, and I believe I've answered it in the chat, but I'm just going to mention it publicly, which is, can you suggest a workaround for lactose intolerant people? And would it be something like cashews, soy milk, or almond milk and nutritional yeast combined in a blender or food processor? Now, I've already explained that milk and dairy are the primary place for lactose, and the show is an entirely dairy-free, animal-free way of cooking. But anything you want to add in terms of making a whole food plant-based mac and cheese that's a workaround using.
But we are using plant-based milk for sure, as you said, and you can use any kind of plant-based milk. Soy, as you mentioned, almond, oat, cashew, any of those kinds of milk. Now, if we are going to add nutritional yeast, there's a bunch of things that we're going to add to make this a cheesy sauce, and one of those things is the nutritional yeast. As far as lactose, I don't think we have any lactose happening because, as you mentioned, it's a plant-based milk, and all the plant-based milks come from either a nut or an oat or a soybean, so it should be okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, that's my answer. That's pretty much my answer. And of course, if you, I have so many kinds of milks in my refrigerator right now. I actually never buy cashew milk, but someone brought me a half a gallon of cashew milk, just literally gave it to me because they didn't want it. And I encourage all of you, when you're transitioning, it's really important to try all those milks. Now, ultimately, it doesn't take very long for you to make your own almond or your own oat milk. It's a very simple process, and you literally soak nuts, and then you blend them, and then you strain them. It's awesome if you can do it on your own. But if you're someone like me that bakes a lot, goes through a lot of milk, I only like a little milk in my tea in the morning. Find the milk that, one, doesn't have a lot of junk in it, because a lot of milks, plant-based milks, have a paragraph, and that's because they need all those added ingredients often to stabilize them to last long on the shelf. But there are some brands that are cleaner and pure. One of them is a brand called 3 Trees almond milk, which is very delicious. The Elmhurst has a pretty good oat milk. Foragers that I just use their yogurt, they have a cashew milk that's pretty good actually. And you just, again, want to look at the label, and often you're looking for just the product and filtered water. Sometimes you're going to see some salt, and it's hard to get around that. The only way to get around that is to make your own. So hopefully that explains all that to the person.
Yep. Thank you. And she says thank you.
Okay, good. Let me just get this. I'm in two places. We can only have so many things on the burner today, and I have to bring Wendy. I call it the Wendy pot because you and I have the same pot, so I call it the Wendy pot.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, and I always say, oh, it's the Wendy pot. I better.
So sweet.
Yeah, I call it the Wendy pot. For a long time, Wendy had this pot, and I just admired it. And then I moved, and then I got it as a gift. And so I feel like it's a Wendy pot in my kitchen. And I love it so much. I think I'm like you, Wendy. I just keep it on the stove, and I just cook everything in it. Everything.
For those of you who are new to cooking, it helps having a nice pot because it inspires one to cook.
It does. And this particular Wendy pot is called a Staub pot, S-T-A-U-B. The soup pot that I've had, I swear, since I was in my 20s, which is over 30 some years, 40 years ago almost, I have had forever and ever, and it's a Le Creuset pot. Lodge makes a very good enamel pot. You do want to, invest. You don't have to have a million pots. You have one big pot, okay, and one really good saute pan, and one good blender, right? But you don't have to have an entire pantry set with many, many pots and pans. You slowly acquire. So if you're new to any of this and maybe just don't even own a saute pan, do a little bit of research because you want to get a ceramic saute pan because they are non-stick, innocent. They're better than what they called the old Teflon of old days when we all used Teflon pans. You want to get a nice ceramic pan. They range anywhere from $40 to $150. The pot I like very much is called an Ozeri, O-Z-E-R-I. I love that pan so much, and I cook a million things in it. So let's get on to the sauce so I don't get too distracted talking to you about how to set up your kitchen because that's a whole show in itself. So what do we need? I need to get the milk out. So we were talking about milk, and I actually need to get the milk out. And we might as well get all of the milk out. The milk out for the quick bread, the milk out for this. So like I said, I have almond milk here. And it's the 3 Trees kind. And what we're going to do is we're going to put our butternut squash. So I've cleaned the squash. It's big pieces, and it says reserve 2 cups. I'm only making half a recipe, so this is 1 cup. I did keep the measurements in the recipe in grams because for me it's just easier to weigh things than to measure things. Everybody measures things. Anytime you can have a recipe in grams or ounces, it's so much more accurate. So I actually weighed this, and it would have been 410 grams, but I cut it in half, so it's 205. And then I'm going to use a cup and a half of non-dairy milk, and that's just going right in there like that. And I see there's some almond sediment sitting here at the bottom. I guess I didn't shake the milk very well, but that's okay. That's going in there. And then what goes in this sauce is cornstarch. I'm using 1 tablespoon, again, reminding you that I'm halving things. Nutritional yeast, which are going to be our cheesy flavor, which is not baker's yeast, it's nutritional yeast. We're using a little bit of garlic powder. I'm using a half a teaspoon, and then I'm using a half a teaspoon of paprika. And then we need to have a half a teaspoon, which I didn't measure out because I just wanted to do it right into here, is some Dijon mustard. So I'm putting in a half a teaspoon of Dijon mustard. That's going to give it its nice little punch. And then ultimately, we put in all the spices, even the cornstarch. So all garlic powder, nutritional yeast, everything's going in here. And including, oh, I just got a whiff of the smoked paprika. And it's so nice. Again, if you're starting out, maybe you don't have all these spices. Don't try to be having 60 spices in one day. Over time, you get your basic ones, your herbs, your basil, your thyme, all your different, and then you get maybe a curry powder and you get some paprika, and slowly you acquire spices. And spices can last really a number of years. You just have to make sure that you're not storing them near the oven, any kind of heat. You want to definitely store them properly. Now that pasta water is boiling like crazy, so I need to check everything here. So let me just make sure that the pasta is not overcooking. It's almost perfect. The soup is cooking rapidly, so rapidly that I think I'm gonna slow it down. Who would have ever thought that? I'm gonna just turn it down is what I'm doing. And we're gonna mix this. So I'm taking this, I have a little NutriBullet over here on the side. I've gotten this pretty tight. And we're gonna mix this. Now I have made this exact same sauce, I want you to know, with roasted red peppers, and that can be good too. You would just omit the butternut squash, but I think because we're going into fall and squash is going to be so abundant, how can you not? And also, as I mentioned, Thanksgiving, you bring a nice mac and cheese to your Thanksgiving meal with saying that you've made a butternut squash. I think it's pretty, people might look at you and say, what? And then they're going to eat it. And I served it to a couple of my friends a week or so ago, and they were like, loved it. And they know, and I don't go on and on with people. Oh, I'm not making a regular mac and cheese. I'm making it different. I just serve it. I don't go and tell people that we don't have cheese in it and we don't have milk and we don't have butter, and I don't bother with any of that. I just make it look as most beautiful as it can, and then they eat it and then they love it, and that's the end of the story. So I have this burner on, and we just blended all that, and we made a sauce, and it's a little bit runny, but that's good actually. And I have this on low, very, very, very low. And what we're going to do is we're going to pour this sauce in here. I might have wanted to do it in a lighter weight pot, but because I have Wendy here and we like the Wendy pot, I just got this pot out. So we are going to get all this out. And we are going to check on the pasta and make sure that that is ready to get all drained. And I have a little bit of a colander here to drain the pasta. And this is going to slowly, I have it on low, and we actually want it to bubble a little bit, but I just want to check on the pasta, and because that's important. And that looks really done. I'm going to bring it closer by, dripping a little bit, but I just pulled out a big spoon and taste it. It's perfect. Absolutely perfect. So we're going to turn that off. We're going to drain that. Get all the water out. And let me just try to do this carefully all at one time. Now I probably am going to wish that I put the sauce right in here. And not dirty. I could have just put the pasta water back in, put this all back in here. That's what I could have done. And then cooked it just in this pot and not dirtied another pot. But I don't know. I was possessed about getting the pot out. And we really want to get all the water out. And we could run it under cold water just so that it doesn't get all sticky. And just let the water go through the colander. Give it a good shake. But it's important to get all the water out. So I'm going to let that sit in this pan like this for just a few minutes and let it really drain. And we are going to need our, what do you call it? Squash that is going to go in as little chunks. We're going to mix that in. Let me just get rid of this. And we are going to, I remember something. When I made this mac and cheese last week, I thought it was delicious, but then I remembered that I'm living in New Mexico. And I suddenly thought to myself, as I was serving it to two friends, I said, you know what? I think this would be really delicious if we added some green chilies. Now, I have lots of chilies from the garden that I just recently harvested, but I thought for convenience, in case someone doesn't have chilies, you can buy large chopped green chilies, organic ones, in a can. And I'm sure that you can buy them wherever you live. I think it's a common thing. And these are literally just chopped green chilies. They're not too hot. I think that this particular one is mild. It doesn't say that, but I'm going to call it mild. Normally, I put a little hot sauce on the top of the chili. But this, I'm going to put some chilies in it. And that will make it so New Mexican, because everywhere here, you get any kind of breakfast food or any kind of burrito or dinner or anything, and you're always getting some kind of chilies, because that's what the state of New Mexico is about, chilies. And maybe I should have been born here, because I love chili so much that it's like me coming home to a festival when I see that all the chilies have been harvested and they're getting roasted. They actually roast them at the grocery store, and then you take them home already roasted. People buy full cases of them here, and they go into a big roaster, and then people sit around the table and just peel them, and then they get frozen, and then they get put away for the year so that you always have the chili. So this is already starting to come to a little bit of a boil. My pasta is ready to go in here. Now, when you put your pasta in there, you're gonna say, boy, that's a lot of sauce. But the good thing is, you want it to be creamy when it comes out of the oven. And as you know, pasta always absorbs sauce. So I'm going to give you a quick kind of show. Just going to show you what this looks like. You see, it's kind of creamy. It's really creamy. There's a lot of sauce. You probably wouldn't serve this like this because it's too saucy. But what we're going to do is I'm going to put my butternut squash in here. Right? I'm going to put the 1 cup I'm adding of butternut squash. And then we're going to, I don't know how many chilies. I don't really know what to say about how many chilies. I'm going to just kind of scatter them. Oh my God, does it already look like I'm drooling? Because it looks so, what a great idea to make it a New Mexican mac and cheese. And I'm going to just hold back and not put the whole can. They can just go in the fridge. That's going to be delicious with the chilies. And then we're going to get this out of the way. And what we're going to do is get a casserole pan. Okay, just a casserole pan. You don't need to grease it. You don't need to line it. This is going to literally, this is all going to get poured in. And this is just going to get poured in like that. Okay, and we're going to get all that sauce out of here because we don't want to leave any of it behind. Now, I haven't tasted anything because I absolutely know it's delicious already. We put all those herbs in. We put in the peppers. Now, I would taste it if I wanted to know how spicy all the things were. Do I want to add more green peppers? I don't think so. I could taste it, but I think it's going to be when you taste a whole bite of the pasta, you're going to grab a few of the chilies. And I don't want to overdo the chilies. I just want them to be in there. So I just want to make sure all this is nice and mixed up. And it's all kind of smooth on the top. And remember, I put the oven on broil. And we're going to put it under the broiler for just 5 minutes. But before we do that, we're going to first rinse my hands because they're wet. And we're going to put a few breadcrumbs on top. Now, I always have ground breadcrumbs in my refrigerator all the time so that I don't have to grind them. I just have a jar full. And remember, Wendy, we used to have a jar just like this between us. We had Wendy jar. We had a Wendy pot now, but Wendy and I used to live 10 blocks from each other, and we would exchange food all the time in one jar, and it had big letters that said Wendy on it. So
I remember it well, and I miss it. I'm ready to have you send care packages.
I know I could do that, couldn't I? But I don't know how it would transport. But you'll just come here one day, and then we'll just reminisce on the Wendy jar. But in a jar that's just like a mason a quart jar, I have breadcrumbs, and I've used the Ezekiel bread, which is a sprouted grain bread, and I have it always in the freezer as just backup. And I don't eat a lot of bread, so I leave it in the freezer, and whenever I need a piece or two, I just kind of pull it off frozen, and then I put it in the oven, or I toast it. I don't have a toaster, but I put it in the oven, and then I just grind it up, and I get these really nice breadcrumbs. Because it's hard to find pure breadcrumbs. You would not believe how many breadcrumbs have added sugar. Literally, if you look at a package of breadcrumbs. So this is gonna go on top as a texture, which I think makes it super, super nice. I like it. It's very nice. And again, it's no work because it's already exists in my refrigerator. And I'll just put this jar right back in. And then the recipe says that if you feel like it, you actually could add a little teeny bit of hot sauce to the top. Now, you saw that I added peppers, and they're very mild. So what I'm going to do is just put a little, this is chipotle habanero sauce. And again, I just got done telling you that I'm the person that likes spicy things. And if you're serving this maybe to your kids or your grandmother or someone who can't tolerate spice, you definitely are not going to put any hot pepper sauce on top. But I just like putting a little bit. And you think I'm shaking it a ton, but it's got a dot of a hole, and it comes out in the most teeny bit way. And I just want to wipe this down with some of it got onto the side of the pan. And we're going to put this in the broiler. Or you could use a really hot oven, but I have it at broil. We just want the top to get brown. That's all, just light brown, little black bits, but this is what this looks like right this very moment. And it's gonna go in for 5 minutes.
It's beautiful, Carole. I may have actually missed something along the way, but one of the participants is asking, what about adding nutritional yeast on top of the breadcrumbs? Did you already have nutritional yeast in that recipe, or the
I
other
did.
one?
It was with the milk and the spices.
That's what I thought.
It had nutritional yeast, mustard, garlic powder, and smoked paprika. But you definitely could do what the person suggested. You could put cheese. I mean, I do have in the refrigerator, I also have a jar of Parmesan cheese that I've made out of nuts and nutritional yeast, and has some some herbs in it like thyme and basil and garlic powder and things. But I didn't use that because it has other things in it that I don't really want with the mac and cheese. If it was just the nutritional yeast with the ground nuts, that would be delicious. But I'm off of even if the nuts are ground, I'm technically off of nuts for this moment due to my oral surgery. So we just are having it plain, and the cheesiness is going to come from the actual sauce.
And I'm just going to pipe in, because we have our Jumpstart people and JCC people, that for those of you who are unfamiliar with nutritional yeast, I'm just kind of flagging. Some people find too much of it makes them very bloated or gassy, and other people don't have a problem with it at all. So in some ways, you'll need to experiment with how little or how much, but it is a plant-based alternative to having things taste cheesy.
And Wendy, I never used it till I became a vegan. Like, I never had a reason. in my life to use nutritional yeast.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I needed to replace that cheese that I introduced it into my diet. And it did take me a little bit to get used to its flavor.
Yes, exactly.
It is not something like sometimes a recipe will call for 2 tablespoons and I'll just use 1.
Correct.
Because I sometimes don't really like the taste of it, but it's really good. It works. It works in a way, you can also make cheese out of nuts and things, but there is something about having just a little bit of the nutritional yeast that really does work as a replacement for what we know as dairy cheese.
Right. And you also have another question here, which is, should we cook the pasta to less than al dente if we want it to taste al dente and not too mushy in the
Yes,
finished
you could. Yes. The thing is, it's going to, depending on, you have to imagine, like I'm cooking this. Yes is the answer. The short answer is yes. But what I'm going to tell you is unless you're serving 2 or 3 or 4 people and everyone's eating the mac and cheese just tonight, right after you've made it, it's going to sit for tomorrow. It's going to be cold in the fridge. You're going to have to heat it up again, and it's going to take. So yes, that would be a good idea to cook it a little bit less because the pasta is going to keep absorbing the sauce. Right? So maybe by day 3, if you're eating it by yourself, it's not going to be as creamy and as saucy as it was on day 1.
Right. Also, I just want to flag for those of you who've come and joined us for the first time, we're usually quite on time, but we're probably going to end up going a little bit past 6:15 and into 6:30 tonight, if those of you can stay. For those of you who can stay, I know Carole has another dish ahead.
And I'm going to make one more dish, and it's going to be fast. And then we're going to finish the soup, and then we're going to be done. And
Okay,
we're going to not forget, Wendy, somehow. I can't forget the mac and cheese while I'm doing another dish.
Correct.
So let's just do the other dish, and we're going to do it. So we're going to get it all mixed up, and I just want you to see how easy it is to make a dessert. So the sweetness for this dessert is going to come from the jewel dates. We use sweetener, for those of you that are new, we use apples, we use bananas, we use sweet potatoes, we use applesauce, we use medjool dates, deglet dates. Everything that comes from the whole food is our sweetener. These are pitted already. These are medjool dates. These are 7 ounces. As I mentioned, this is not my recipe, but thank God for Kathy Fisher, because when I transitioned from being a vegetarian and eating sugar and eating butter and all the things I did, I thought, oh my God, if I'm not baking, what am I going to do? So I learned some of my things from Kathy because she makes a number of desserts. And thank goodness, because from there, I taught myself what I needed to do and how to sweeten things and how to make things without butter and sugar and how to make them taste so delicious. We need 1 cup. How much we need? We need 1 cup of plant-based milk, and that's going right in there with the dates. If you have the time to let this sit, that would be ideal. We're going to have 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Yeah, 2 teaspoons of vanilla is going in there. Now, what we do need to do that I just realized that we didn't do is before I let these sit and soak, I actually, in the very same container, so I don't have to dirty another one, the NutriBullet comes with many different attachments. I usually, and I have to wash the blade, I just realized, I usually blend the dry things first, and then I do the wet things. But I just now am making more work for myself, but that's okay. So what we need, the base of this is going to be oats and millet. Both are different grains. So we're using old-fashioned oats. We're using 1.25 cups measured, and I'm carefully pouring 3/4 cup of millet, which is a hard grain. We're not cooking it right now. It's just going to cook in the oven. But if you were to eat millet, you would cook it on the stove, much like rice. And It's a very good green. Oh, so that's pretty full. We'll see if this works. I think it will, and this is not completely dry. And we're just going to, what we're going to do is make flour, right? We're going to make out of our oats. We're going to make, and millet, we're going to make a flour. Okay, so that's all ground. That's going into the bowl, right? Just direct, like this. Okay, that is perfect. Again, I would have done it in this and then added this, but it's all fine. Okay, and there is some kind of stuck here because it did get stuck. Now, what we're going to add is we need to have a teaspoon of baking powder, a teaspoon of soda, a teaspoon of cinnamon, a half a teaspoon of ginger, and a half a teaspoon of nutmeg. Okay, that's all going in there. And then I get a little thing and we look at our, oh, that's pretty much done. We're going to stop the oven. It's good that we come back here and get the mac and cheese. It's boiling already. Oh my God, does it look delicious? Oh my goodness. I want to show everyone what that looks like.
Wow, that looks so yummy.
And it's bubbling like crazy, and we're just going to leave it right here for this very moment.
It looks
I know
delicious.
you can't see it. That's just going to move things just a little teeny bit so you can be looking at it. But it's going to be so delicious. And you saw that it comes together really fast, right? And you can't forget about it when it's in the broiler like that, because you could end up burning the top. You just want the crumbs to get a little crusty and a few black spots. So those are your dry ingredients. Then we have our wet ingredients and our sweeteners all in here. We're going to put the lid on this, and we're going to blend this. And it's important to close this. And we need zucchini, right? Zucchini like this. You grate it on the big holes, and we have 2 cups of grated zucchini. Now, I have been making zucchini everything for the last month and a half. I had some, not too many plants, but each plant gives you 1 million zucchinis. You give them all away, but you can't seem, I don't know, I made corn fritters. I've been eating zoodle noodles. I've been eating so much zucchini that I promise you, Wendy, we're not having zucchini next month. We're gonna do greens. Next month is green, everything green, and we're doing that, but we're definitely not having zucchini because I don't think I can buy a zucchini for maybe a couple months to come. So that's all blended and nice and good, and we're going to just move that out of the way there. And this is going to come out of here, and we're going to get a different spatula. And you want to get all that stuff that's stuck in the blade like that. Now, I do tell you, and maybe some of you have seen me make this. I have made this bread before when I add a 1/4 cup of cocoa, and make chocolate zucchini bread. And she recommends that it's optional. If you want, you can put a 1/2 cup of walnuts or pecans, whatever kind of nuts you want is really lovely in this quick bread, but I'm not putting any nuts in it whatsoever. Since I've been adding the cocoa and making chocolate zucchini bread, I also made a note in the recipe saying that you could add chocolate chips, non-dairy chocolate chips if you wanted to this, because chocolate chips and zucchini would be delicious. And then what we're going to just do is get this all mixed up with a spatula. And it's a little dry. You're going to see that you're thinking it's not so wet. But once you get it mixed up, it all holds together just fine. And you just have to give it good mixing. You don't need a mixer or anything. This is a quick bread, and you can make muffins out of the same exact batter. You could make a loaf pan. You can make a square 8x8 pan. Any of those things work with this batter. I really like to use a silicone pan if you have one. Why? Because you don't have to spray it. You don't have to do anything with silicone. You literally just put, if you have the muffin pan, I could just show you one in the cabinet here. If you wanted to make muffins, you could use one of these silicone pans, and it works great. You scoop the muffins in here, cook the muffins, and depending on the size muffin is how long it takes to cook. But we're going to use a regular pan because I don't own a silicone loaf pan. So what I have done is I've taken parchment paper, just strips of parchment, and I've lined it in this direction, and then I've taken a strip and lined it in the other direction. So it looks like that. And the first scoop that you put in, you do have to be kind of careful to make sure that you're not moving the paper. But once you get started and it's in there, then you're right on the money. Like once you start putting it in and you get the weight in there, that paper is going to stop moving around. And I'm just using a spoon at the moment, and we're going to, because I'm carefully putting it in to make sure the paper's not sliding around. And this bread takes almost 65 minutes to cook. It cooks at a low temperature of 325, and I definitely recommend doing that. And let's just get the rest of the batter. And when I am using nuts, I usually put some nuts inside, and then I sprinkle some nuts on the top, because that indicates if there's nuts on the top to your guests. It tells them there's nuts in this particular product. And I think that's good to do because there's a lot of people that have allergies and can't have nuts. There are people, we're told that we can have like 2 ounces a day because we do need the fat from the nuts. They are good for us, but you can't be eating too many of them because they are full of fat and full of calories. So that is in there just like that, and it's ready to go. So that would go away like that, and we just have to finish the soup, Wendy. It will take less than 5 minutes.
Awesome.
So that is really good. We're not so late. This would go in the oven, just so you know, 325 degrees. And I just want to show you that we have one. I already have one that's cooked, right? I did it earlier so that we would have it. And see these little flaps that we have? I'll get a little platter for it. I have a New Mexican platter. Maybe that's what the chili should go on, actually. But that is going to go here. And the paper, you see, it just comes out. It just lifts out of the pan, and then you barely have to wash the pan, which is quite great. And this paper just comes off very, very nicely. And you have your zucchini bread. And that's nice for an afternoon treat. It's nice for a breakfast moment. And that's that. Is there any questions about the bread before we just finish the soup?
Let me just double check. I don't see questions about the bread. No.
Nope.
No,
Okay.
it's delicious, Carole.
Yeah, we'll cut it, but I'm just trying to clear an area. I just want to finish the soup. It won't take but a second to finish the soup. And if we had our blender clean, or a Vitamix or any kind of blender, we could put this soup right into the blender, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use an immersion blender.
Oh, Carole, there is a question. which is could you use all oats as a replacement for the millet? So just make a big oat flour.
I don't know that answer. You probably could, but I don't know. And I am a full-time baker, and I will tell you, the minute you replace one ingredient, you are in your own science lab. So I think it's worth trying to do. The millet expands. It's a grain. I would almost, if you could eat quinoa, I would put quinoa. If you're trying to avoid the millet, because I know some people can't have millet, I would almost try quinoa over more oats. But you could try to make it with all oats and see what happens. The only way you're gonna know is to try. And that's the way I've done so much experimenting myself, teaching myself how to bake things. And I've had failures, I've had successes, I've tweaked a million times things, and you have to just experiment and try it. But it's a good question.
I am also just quickly going to answer about the recipes. I was hoping someone piped in. There's been some questions on recipes, Carole. And it does seem that if you register for Cooking with Chef Carole on the Plant Powered Metro New York website, then we're able to send you the recipes ahead of time. But without registering ahead, then there's no way we can actually send you the recipes. And so we put them in the chat a couple of times during the show. But if you want them ahead, by all means, please register.
Okay. Yeah, and registering is nice because then we know how many of you there are. And like I said, it's kind of a treat because you get a reminder. You get an email on Sunday saying, you've registered for this class. See you later, and here are the recipes. So I'm going to pour just half of this coconut milk in. I think it's plenty. I'm going to put the other bit aside. And I'm just going to blend this. I'm going to put the burner on, actually, but I want to get this. You don't have to have it so smooth. It's up to you. Oops, and you know what I didn't do? Was I didn't take out I'll end up grinding the cloves, but here are the bay leaves. You definitely, and if I saw that the cloves were sitting on top, but they're going to get blended. Well, this is pretty. I like it having a little bit of texture. I don't like it so super smooth. I think it's pretty important to have just that, like that. I like it a little bit chunky, not too chunky, but chunky. It's hard to tell what it is right here, but it's kind of smooth, but kind of bumpy. Let's remove all of these things. And I do not like the counters being so dirty. So I put it back on the heat here. The reason is that we need to add the spinach, and we need to add the cilantro, and we need to add, so I'm going to add the chopped cilantro that I cut earlier. They say about 3 tablespoons is probably a little bit more. This you don't really have to cut, but we have a cutting board somewhere. We do have a cutting board, and we have a knife somewhere. Right here. And I'm just going to cut this so that it's just a little bit chopped. You can never have too much spinach as far as I'm concerned in the soup. If you don't like spinach, you could definitely use kale. You could use chard, whatever kind of green you want. Next month, we're going to talk about how you can add greens to everything, literally everything. It's hard. I always say you're either a bean person or you're a greens person. I am more of a beans person than a greens person. So I'm one of those people that have to remind myself that it's very, very important to eat greens.
Carole, for the record, I'm now eating more beans.
I'm
the
so
audience,
happy.
I've been the greens gal, and she's been the beans gal. But anyway, we seem to be evening out, so that's good news.
I love that. And I've been growing kale, Wendy, in the garden all summer. And I literally have been eating kale every day, which isn't really something I do on my own if it's not in the yard. And I've cleaned the whole garden because we've already dipped to 29 degrees here at night. So everything has come in from outside. And I have left the kale still growing because it can tolerate the first frost.
Yes.
And it's still growing and producing. It just keeps, leaves just keep coming out and out. So that's the only thing left in the garden is the kale. So it's pretty great. I just squeezed, I didn't tell you, but I just squeezed one whole lime into the soup, okay? And we're just letting this spinach cook down just a hair. And we have so many dishes. That's the thing when you're making so much in a short time, you don't really have time to clean up. So all you want is for this spinach to start to collapse. And if you want, you could add the spinach per time you cook it, the greens if you want. You don't have to put them in as a finishing thing. Now, the soup is quite delicious. For those of you that are used to salt, you might say it needs a little salt because your taste bud is used to that. And it does take about 21 days to adjust your palate. I'm going to put just a little, gonna drink of water. I'm going to put a dot of chili flakes. And Wendy, I'm going to get this all served up and make a nice presentation out of it. And then I thought maybe you could do the announcements because you said you have a lot. And then we'll just come back and we'll just see everything finished.
That'd be fine. Just to let the audience know, sorry we are running a bit late, but I am going to do the announcements quickly and we'll come back to Carole. So announcements at Plant Power Metro New York. For those of you who might be tuning in who are interested in our Jumpstart, we have a new Jumpstart starting on October 18th. And tomorrow, I believe, is actually the last day to register. I may have said today was, but I think tomorrow is actually the last day to register. So please join us. These jump starts are actually quite informative and they're good refreshers for those who are already plant-based. Anyway, October 17th online is our Heart to Healthy Heart series with Dr. Heather Schenkman, who's the author of a book called The Vegan Heart Doctor's Guide to Reversing Heart Disease, Losing Weight, and Reclaiming Your Life. Please join us for that. Our producer on this show is also the host of the other show, and he's terrific. October 20th, we're having an in-person social at District Saigon in Queens. And on the 21st, we're having another in-person event in New Jersey, a potluck, and we're joining Dr. Ron Weiss, who's got a regenerative farm called Ethos Farm. And he's both a doctor and a farmer, and it makes the whole event actually quite special. But please join us for that community gathering. And then the 24th, particularly for those of you at the JCC, we have an event sponsored by the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan with Dr. Jessica Krant, who's going to be talking about eating for skincare and healthy anti-aging. October 25th, we have one more social event at Caravan of Dreams on the Lower East Side in New York. So anyone in the New York, New Jersey area, please come in and join us in person. And then finally, for all of you, Plantathon 2023 is coming. This week, we'll be announcing an incredible lineup of 10 events in November, 2, I believe, online and 2 in person and 8 on our virtual showcase. And we're celebrating the plant-based health movement while we raise essential funds for our mission. This is our main push for fundraising during the year. So please join us for that. And we hope you'll give generously. And if you're not already on our mailing list, please sign up on the homepage of our website. So you'll get the scoop on Plantathon as soon as it's announced. It's usually a super exciting event. Okay, so for those of you who can make it to our in-person events, please do. Those of you who are far away, please join us online. And you can register for everything on our website, which is plantpoweredmetronewyork.org. www.thevegievanguard.org. Carole can be reached at carole@thevegievanguard.com, or she's also on Instagram at the Veggie Vanguard. And then I will start a little bit earlier to say, please consider a donation to Plant Powered Metro for this show or for any of our events, so we can continue doing our best work in communities. Okay, back to Carole, and take us out, Carole.
Look at the soup. Here's the big pot of soup. It's super, super amazingly delicious. It's perfect. I put it in the bowl. I put 1 big spoonful of the basmati rice, and then I'm gonna put a dollop of this amazing spicy yogurt. Okay, and then I sliced the zucchini bread so you can see how beautiful it is. And then we could also put a spoon into I'm pretty much dying to taste the chili. So I'm just gonna go right in there and just show you how delicious that looks. And oh, I can see the butternut squash and the chili and the pasta all in one. It's kind of too much to put in one's mouth, but I have to taste it. It's very hot. I'm dropping it. The chilies make it delicious. It's perfectly moist and creamy, and the squash tastes good. And I hope that you try any of these things, maybe all of them, because they're delicious.
I will say, for those of you who like to be early planners, that whole lineup, Carole, looks great for Thanksgiving already. Between the zucchini bread, the mac and cheese, the soup, it just looks great for Halloween or Thanksgiving. So, yum, looks delicious.
And for me, all of this is comfort food. You know, having soup makes me feel, just warms my heart, and we're going into the fall and the cold. Mac and cheese seems to be the thing that everyone loves about comfort food, and it's important. Dessert is also sometimes a comfort food too, and it's good to know that you can make it whole food, plant-based, with no sugar, oil, or salt.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Bye, Carole. Thank you, everyone. Thank you
Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you in November.
November 5th will be the next class, Sundays at 5. Bye.
Bye.